So this week just gone, 2 Australians were put to death for drug trafficking offences. Chan and Sukumaran were basically seen as the co-ringleaders, according to the other Bali Nine, during when they gave their testimony in their trial a decade ago or more, as being the ringleaders, and thus got the death penalty. When you think about ringleaders and drug trafficking, you kind of, it creates a really different sort of picture. And I did a little bit of research, and when you look at how much heroin was actually trafficked on that fated run, it didn't actually make it through. It was something, it was just over 8 kilograms. The use of heroin in Australia for that year sits at about 5 to 6 tonnes of heroin. So I think when you're thinking of organising 9 people, most of them being mules, meaning having, you know, drugs strapped to them, the most being about 2.5 kilograms or 2.8 kilograms per person. That many people being organised to get that relatively small amount of heroin back sort of sits Chan and Sukumaran as being fairly small time opportunist criminal, of course, but really small fish operators. We're not talking drug lords here. And it does seem kind of, you know, in the picture of that, in the scheme of things, it just doesn't seem to fit the criteria for the death penalty, which according to the Human Rights Convention is supposed to be kept for the most heinous and most violent and aberrant, you know, abhorrent crimes like, you know, murder and terrorism. So, you know, organising the smuggling of just over 8 kilograms of heroin doesn't quite seem to fit. Now, Indonesia has argued, of course, that, you know, drugs and the drug trade does cause the death of people, you know, in Indonesia, and there, in a sense, that is a serious offence. But they were taking the drugs out of Indonesia, you know, into Australia. So it sort of seems like a weird irony again that you'll be facing the death penalty for taking 8 kilograms or more of drugs out of Indonesia into Australia, where we don't have the death penalty. So it kind of feels in a way that they've paid the maximum price. I mean, did we outsource the death penalty because we don't have it here? Now they're starting to ask questions about the Australian Federal Police and their involvement in the tipping off of the Bali Nine and the drug smuggling operation. And you kind of can't help but ask the question, why didn't they pick them up in Australia? If intelligence was good, why not pick up Australian drug traffickers as they enter Australia, where they can actually meet Australian punishment, not have it meted out in Indonesia where there is a death penalty. It's also been in the media too, apart from the other many sort of news stories, but Jeffrey Robertson, who is a very well-known legal rights or human rights activist and lawyer, has come out and pointed out 2 other points, which is you can't, or you know, it's against the Human Rights Convention to basically, you know, carry through with the death penalty while someone's case is still pending. And there was an appeal, which is, I think, is going to be heard on the 12th of May. And also, it's against the Human Rights Convention to actually carry out a death penalty after a long period of torture and that continual period of incarceration on death row, you know, going through that process of appeal, getting hopeful, then it's knocked back over and again for such a long period of time, is seen as torture. So it is, you know, again, you know, we sort of reached this point, and, you know, it does, I don't know. I think for me, when it came to clemency or mercy, I think the one thing that you can't overlook is the age that they were, you know, 21 and 22 or something, really early 20s. And recent research sounds weird, but, you know, recent research has shown that, according to neurologists, you know, the brain, particularly of young people, doesn't actually develop properly into an adult brain till around about 25, which basically means, you know, the centres of the brain that operate pretty well on impulsivity with that inability to actually really think things through properly. At no point in your life are your left and right hemispheres less connected than they are through that prolonged period of adolescence. So in a sense, you know, age should have been taken into account as well. That, you know, here they were 10 years on, pretty well rehabilitated and grown up. You know, we do need to show mercy, I think, for the crimes that young people commit, because, you know, they haven't yet got the cognitive ability probably to make the best decisions just because of brain development, and they're not quite there yet. I don't know. I think once again it brings it back without that, you know, sort of thing. It's about capital punishment, isn't it? And the death penalty, I think, is always wrong. I don't think there's ever a case, no matter how heinous, that can actually justify the taking of another human's life as some sort of act to try and restore justice, because it's not. You can't restore justice that way. If we're living now where the only way to live is to basically kill a citizen, you know, to maintain your civilization, then that's just not civilization, as I can tell. And before you start going out there and cancelling your trip to Bali, it's not just Indonesia that has the death penalty. You know, so much. Most of the nations of the world still have the death penalty, which I think shows that, you know, as a human race, we're still prioritising sociopathy over empathy when it comes to actually our own human behaviour and the management of humans and their behaviour. So before you actually do that, think about the other places. Like, I think America still has 32 states that have the death penalty. So before you boycott Bali, maybe you could boycott, I don't know, KFC, McDonald's, Nike shoes, Apple computers, and maybe you could stop going to Hollywood movies. Because, I don't know, in my opinion, you know, and it's just my opinion, just one little person, when it comes to making change or really changing things, you know, I think the best way, you know, to hit to the heart of the matter is not with a bullet, it's with mercy. Anyway, it's very sad. Shocking.